Yeah, let's just kick this off. So the newest product in the Distress line are Distress paint. So what these are, this is a water-based acrylic paint, and it has some really unique properties to other paints, because obviously we have the Adirondack dabbers, we have the studio paints. So this is going to be a very fluid acrylic paint, so it's got a mixing ball in there, so the viscosity is very, very liquid. The benefit to this paint is it works on multi-surfaces, so we can use it on paper, chipboard, grunge board, acrylic, metal, glass, plastic, any of those things. Now, some of the cool features of this, first of all, of course, is how fluid this is. And that's one of the things that people are going to kind of need to get used to, because if they're used to working with the dabbers or even studio, it has a much heavier viscosity than this one. This paint doesn't contain any fillers, so its drying time is a bit longer than most paints. In fact, like I tested these in Arizona, left these open for a month, no caps at all, and the paint didn't dry up. The top dried, but I touched it and the paint just became liquid again. So here's some things to know about some unique properties of it being distress. So first of all, if I put it on the surface, this is going to react with water the same way distress inks or paints, stains, all have that same cool reaction. And the more water you add, the more that paint is going to react, only while it's wet. And it's always going to maintain its color, so it's not going to shift to a lighter color when you get it wet.
It almost looks like it marbles a little.
It's cool. We've been referring to this as like this inky paint. It's very strange because of all the different things that it can do. So let's work on a surface. So if I took some of this paint and let's say I just wanted to put some on paper. Now, because it's in a dabber, obviously we can paint with the dabber this way, but if you don't want to have the paint lines, you can go in just with your fingers and you can easily blend that out and it will create almost like a chalk finish. Or if you didn't want to use your fingers, you could go in and you could add some paint, and you could go in with a blending tool. So here we can go in with just some foam, and we can actually blend some of this out. So there's a lot of different ways that you can work with the paints. The favorite thing about these paints is that if you get it on your hands, it's going to wipe off just with a baby wipe or a wet cloth. So it's not going to stain your hands the way inks will. So for those people that I think are kind of like entry-level mixed media, kind of wanting to play a little bit, this is really safe for them because it cleans up super easy. Just comes right off, even after it's dry. But let's talk about what really makes these paints, I think, do some crazy distress stuff. So I'm just going to put some colors on the craft sheet, and I like to throw in some of the bright colors. Right now, it's 24 of the distress colors, 24 of the 48 that's in the palette so far. I'll ask. I'll keep begging for more. That's just what I do.
It's a hard sell.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. I'm going to put some right on the craft sheet, and then I'm just going to spray this with water just to get kind of some of that going on, even though it's not really moving on the craft sheet. And now when I go in with my paper, I'm just going to start to marbleize these paints. It takes on a really interesting effect. So these colors, like if I wanted to go in and add a color, I could still go back and I can add some of that. I can spritz a little bit more water. I can introduce an entirely new color. And while this is on there, again, I can go in with water, and you can see it almost creates like a splatter effect. And the more water you add, the more these colors are going to marbleize. And that's what's really different than regular acrylic paints. Because with regular acrylic paints, when you start to mix those colors and get them wet, the colors don't actually marbleize like this. They just mix and they become muddy. So this is really going to give you a very, very cool effect. Now, you don't have to heat set this. I'm just speeding it up with a heat tool. So you really can. Now, this paint, that's another nice thing. It's so liquid that I could just go in with another tag, another piece of paper, another anything, and just go in and use that if I wanted to, which I don't. So from a texture perspective, this is another great feature of using distress paint. You know, this is kind of introducing an opaque medium to the distress line. Because when we work with other distress products, the ink pads are translucent, the stains are translucent, the markers are translucent. So having this opaque medium is a bit interesting because people aren't really used to that opacity in the world of distress. You know, we're always used to, you know, if you start layering pink on yellow, on blue, on green, you're going to have brown. Where this, you know, you're going to keep these colors because we're dealing with the paint. So when this paint is on a surface, once it's on there, like even if you pick this one up and you slide your finger over it, you can't feel where the paint is and the paper is. So it doesn't have any fillers. It doesn't have that hand. I know it's really weird because you put it on there and you think, oh, I'm going to feel like this chalkiness. You don't. So once I have paint on a surface and it is dry, it is completely permanent, which means if I get it wet, it won't re-wet at all. So it's blendable and it does all the play when it's wet, but when it dries, it's just a layer.
Is that even if it air dries?
Even if it air dries. So the heat has nothing to do with the fact of making it permanent. So it's really nice if you wanted to put put some color down. So again, even if you weren't going to go with something marbly, you could take something, let's say like craft paper or dark cardstock. You can paint this over the top, let it dry, then you could stamp and go in and color with the markers because it's not going to re-wet that paint below it.
It shows up on dark cardstock.
Absolutely, yeah, I'll show you
Even
on
the dark colors.
Yeah, I'll show you on black, I'll show you on craft.
We believe you.
Oh, come on. So let me go in. They're like, no, we want to see it. We want to see it to believe it. Okay, so here's some things. If I wanted to go in, let's say we want to add some color, because it is important to always tie in the other products that you have with something new. So Distress inks, here I can go in. This makes me a little more comfortable to kind of tone down that bright pink with a little bit of brown. That's a little bit more my speed. If I want to add a little punch of bright color, let's see, what do we have? Let me reach over here. Ah, there we are. Let's throw in a little bit of this. Peacock feathers. Nice color. So let's say we wanted to throw in some of that too. Now remember, this is going to be translucent right over that opaque, but Distress ink is always reactive with water. It's never going to be permanent. So now I can go in and just start, whether I want to do water, whether I want to create some dripping effects. And what that's going to do is that's really going to start breaking through my ink layer, but it's not re-wetting my paint layer at all. So it just creates a whole nother texture. And you can see as this starts to dry, all those little spots appearing through the ink, revealing that bright color. So see right here, I put peacock feathers over that pink. So you can see wherever I put water,
The pink comes back through.
it does. Yeah, so this will work as a resist as well, allowing you to stamp in this paint. It's wonderful to stamp with because of its fluid viscosity. So you could stamp with this paint, and then when you ink over it, it's going to act as a resist. And so you can keep working with this stuff. But look at this one that's just been air drying, of how great we get that color gradation with the paint. That's what I said, it's kind of like an inky paint. It's really strange. So if we're going to do, say, dark cardstock, let's just take white. If I start with white, obviously we're going to get some opacity. I can also blend that out to get kind of like a chalky finish. If I wanted to go in, like you were asking, with some of the darker colors, do we want to go into what? Well, other than black. It's a bit boring, yeah. So even my darker colors are going to show up because, again, we're dealing with opaque. If I want to blend color, just like regular paints, I can blend with my dabber if I want. It's not going to ever contaminate because these only dispense paint. They don't pull paint back in. Or you can work on your craft sheet if you want to create new palettes. If you want to lighten colors, you can mix colors that way. It's just because of how these paints work. They're just so incredibly fluid. They're really, really easy to blend together. So that's why I said it's just, to me, it's a very safe mixed media entry-level kind of thing where people are like, well, I don't really know, and am I going to need to have a thinner? Am I going to need this? No. Now, in addition to on paper, it's also great on things like plastic. So if you try to feel that, even if you feel it like on the clock, you don't feel any paint on there. I swear it's just a piece of metal. Because again, no fillers. So we could go in, we could take plastic, we'll just take one of these. Take one of these big old alpha parts, pretty cool. So I can do this on glass bottles if I wanted to. A lot of people are wanting to work on different metal embellishments to alter it. And all we have to do is just go in with our paints and just apply it. So if we want coverage, we can just dab it right on, and you can see that it's going to cover the surface. But at the same time, you don't have to worry about that. We can actually mix some of that too if we want to create a little bit more of a patina look. We can kind of model that around. You could let it air dry, or we're just going to start heat drying this.
How long would it take to air dry?
If you put it on this thick, I would say you're going to give it a good 5 minutes, which is nice. No, not long, but I wanted it to have far more open time than like the Adirondacks or when you see Mackie with the patinas, they're very fast drying. So this, I wanted that open time because I want the ability to wet and get that to react and marbleize.
Is there any advantage to using the Adirondacks for any particular project over these?
No.
Just checking.
Yeah, unless you really like that, I guess, texture to it. Yeah, I think that would be it. Or if you were going to go on metal and you really wanted to be completely solid and opaque, you would probably use that.
To get that texture, if you pounce and pounce and pounce and then heat it like that, this will still dry flat.
Totally.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you can't get the texture.
You can't. You can't get like that bubble effect we get with the Adirondack metallics. You can't. So on this one, I started drying it so you can see how it started to get matte around some of the areas, but some of the areas are also still a little shiny. So this is pretty cool on plastic. I just like to show this because you can go in, dry it almost complete where you see just a little bit of shine left, and then just go in with a dry cloth and just kind of start buffing this over the top.
Oh, very good.
And it really creates that great kind of chippy distress look. And again, if you guys want to pass it around, when you feel it, there's just nothing there.
So those are the places that were still shiny.
Yeah. Yep. Because remember, when it's dry, it's permanent. So yeah, I'll pass that on. It's like feel-o-vision. You have to feel it. Because there you would feel like it's like it would be chippy. Like you would expect to like feel the pitted areas and things like that. But
Interesting.
yeah, that's what makes it so fun. It's a very, very unique formulation. We've worked on this for quite a while. We wanted something that, obviously we've done enough paints. I wanted something that was going to be completely different, but that would also really work well with distress. So if you wanted to create a background where you use some paint, you could throw on some stain and you can marbleize that way, you can do that as well. For people that like to work on fabrics or even things like crinkle ribbon, let me just take a piece of that just to show you. This is really fun because most of the time you wouldn't think of wanting to use paints on ribbon. But I can go in again because it's so fluid, and I can swipe some of this just in different areas. And then I can go in with Distress Stain, and I can swipe right over that, and it's going to resist immediately. So it's already going to give the ribbon or that fabric a whole different look. So whether you were going to put pink on there or anything like that.
Now, if you spritz it with water, do they go into each other?
Absolutely. So if I spritz it with water, you can see how that paint is just going to start to wick into the ink, just give it kind of that cool, soft look. And we'll dry this up. And that's another great thing, that when you're using it on fabric, you don't get that really heavy hand. It's not like crunchy ribbon. It still stays a nice fluid ribbon. So it's great just because there's a multi-surface paint, but more than that, you've got these great features of its reactive nature with water. If you wanted to watercolor with it, so you could dab some on your palette, just pick up your water brush and start watercoloring, but now you could watercolor on black cardstock, you could watercolor on craft.
Can you dab it on stamps?
Absolutely, yeah, I'll show you its detail. When you stamp with it, it's pretty incredible simply because of the fluid nature of it. So like this on your crinkle ribbon, I mean, yeah, see how soft that is? It's a totally different look than when we were using stain. Because if you went over that, like if we did broken china and then we went over with frayed burlap, you're not going to still see that vibrancy of that light blue. It's going to, it'll mix together. So it's one of those things that it took me a while to get used to, because I'm so used to working with translucent things that it's like, oh yeah, I could paint this. And then if you hate it, you could always go back and totally change it. So, all right, let's take craft. We'll take a stamp. We'll stamp this, stamp the globe. That'll be fine. So if I want to stamp with this, I'll just do something light. Gonna shake it up. I'm just gonna dab it on to begin with, and then I'll just kind of start swiping it around. Because it's really fluid, you don't want to fill in all your detail with liquid paint, but we definitely want to get enough paint on the surface. So it is important to kind of do a little bit of dabbing as well as just a little bit of swiping. Because we want to dab the paint on, but then we want to just kind of swipe it across. But you can see how wet it is on the stamp. So you get that nice kind of fluid coverage. Stamp it down, and we get really good detail. You can see the words, you can see the lines. Again, because it doesn't have that filler, so when you're putting it onto the stamp, you don't have that extra paint filling in all of those little details. I mean, even here, all the little hash marks in there.
Once that dries, if you go on it with your watercolor markers, your distress markers, it's like a resist.
Totally. Because remember,
It's like
blend
white embossing.
It is. And you could emboss with this. In other words, the paint's going to stay wet long enough that if you wanted to put clear embossing powder, because maybe you wanted that kind of pitted look you get with paint, you could. Because you still have that open time with the paint. It's a new animal. It is. And it is one of those things that you kind of have to see what it does to really get it. Because you just think like, oh, paint, yeah. And you threw a distress name on it. Well done, That really wasn't it. That's not what I'm about. But it is important that if you're going to stamp, you do have to remember to clean your stamp. You have to clean that while the paint's wet. Otherwise, just painted stamp. Not that you're going to destroy the stamp.
Right inside all the details.
Yeah, it would. I mean, I wouldn't say that it would harden, but I would say that it won't ever come out. Even with the stamp cleaner, it won't come out because the solvent's not even going to break it down. So yeah, on this, we could then go in with inks, because now that that's dry, we can go in and it's going to work as a great resist. But it's also going to take a little color, so we can leave it like that, or if we mist towel, we can wipe over it the same way we would your Adirondack paints. So I can wipe over that if I wanted to bring that white back out. Here's what I want to show you. I'll pass this around again. If you stamp in other paints, because again, I've done quite a bit of this with Adirondack before, where I've stamped in that, or you stamp in gesso or something like that. Again, just one of those things, if you feel across it, you don't know where there's a stamped image. It doesn't sit on the surface. It's an inky paint. It's paint. So let's talk about one more thing, and that is, oh, I'm doing good on time. That is going over text, because again, if you like to collage, I know, Di's going to do a lot of stuff like with art journaling or inks or sprays. If you have a printed surface, whether this was tissue tape or whether it was a stamped image or dictionary paper or anything like that, if you already have a background, maybe you have some really nice pattern paper or something like that, and you wanted to go in with a color, let's even take a brighter color. We'll take like Salty Ocean. If I paint over this, that's exactly what I've done, is I paint over it. But if while it's wet, you want to blend, you can still pull some of that area out. So you can make elements translucent in some areas, so you can kind of have some of that print come out, or you can leave it opaque. It's completely up to you. So that's really nice if you do a background stamp. Maybe you stamp it in, black or red or anything like that, and then go over it with paint, and then just start smearing it around with your fingers, bringing some of that imagery out, leaving some of it still underneath, and now you can still go back and stamp over the top of it, color over the top of it. But I also love the fact of coloring with these. If you had an image and you had something on dark paper, the ability to take a water brush or a cut and dry nib and pick up the paint and go in and actually paint onto darker areas, that's really nice, just to have that little opaque feature of that.
So you could just paint with full strength of it.
Yeah, you can paint right from the dabber tops. Because all these paints they're super wet. Yeah. So that's some of the cool things of distress paint. Yeah. I'll show you one other thing that's new, which is rock candy, just to give you an idea. Would you mind grabbing me that swatch thing that's right on the board? Thanks. So, rock candy. This was a dry glitter that we launched this summer, rock candy dry glitter. Really, really popular. We had it in the smaller jar. Thanks. And what's cool about this is that it's a completely clear glitter, so it doesn't have any iridescence. Most of the other clear glitters have some sort of iridescent green or yellow or blue. This doesn't, it's completely clear. But it also has multiple particle sizes too. So it's got some ultrafine in there, it's got some chunkier glitter. So a cool thing about rock candy is that you can create any colors of glitter you want onto a surface, and that is simply by taking whatever that is. So here, this could have been a piece of chipboard, it could have been even something that maybe you pre-stamped. So like if you stamped text on that in black, I always like to gesso chipboard first, because that keeps it from being porous, because if we put alcohol ink on it, it's going to really get sucked down in there. Put on your multi-medium, glue and seal, whatever adhesive you want, even glossy accents. Put on your rock candy, let it dry. And then to color it, all you need to do is go in with alcohol inks. Now, when I go in with alcohol inks, I prefer to use foam, whether it's blending foam or cut and dry foam, because if you use the felt that you normally would with alcohol ink, it's going to stick into the glitter and you'll have a fuzzy, well, yeah, you'll have a little fuzzy glitter, yeah. So here I can and you can put whatever colors you want, but then I'm just going to go right over the top of that. And what's weird is when you first put this on, it doesn't look like it's going to be shiny because it really kind of soaks in. But once this dries, you'll start to see just that sparkle. And the more it dries, the more translucent it gets.
It's pretty.
So it's cool. It's a cool way to do that. Now that doesn't mean that you can't still mix this. You can still pour some of this into a cup, add your drops of alcohol ink and mix it up. And create a lot of different colors of glitter, but it is a quick way that if you have one glitter, you glitter over something, you add some alcohol ink, you just get a whole different look. So there you go. So, any questions? Any questions on what you saw? I like it, like pick my brain. It is we don't want to sound like gimmicky, but you have to see it to believe it. You do, because you can hear all day long about like, okay, it's a new paint, right? How many versions of paints are out there?
Can you do the modeling with the alcohol ink that you do sometimes by putting one color on and then another color? Or
Yeah,
two colors at once?
You could. Now, here's my suggestion though. Because chipboard or grunge board is incredibly porous, then I would definitely make sure that you seal the surface before you glitter it. This way, all those inks will still play because the more ink you do, even gesso will eventually absorb alcohol ink.
Oh, seal it with like medium.
Yeah, so like maybe you paint chipboard with gesso first and then maybe put multi-medium on it, let that dry, and then glue your glitter on. This way, when you're putting stuff on, doesn't have a chance to soak through. Yeah, or you could use, like a Promotac, but see, as it's drying, it just becomes more and more sparkly. And that's why I didn't think it was gonna work, because the first time I alcohol inked it, I was like, oh, it's kind of dull. But then as it dries, it's pretty awesome.
Have you come across anything this doesn't work?
I have not yet, and I've tried. Before I wanted to put this in the line, I really tried to make it not work. I tried to dry it out. I even left them like with the caps off in my studio where the sun is going to hit them. I'm like, I want to cook these suckers. I really want them to, because I just think it's important to have a product that, if you're going to invest in a whole nother type of paint, you need to make sure like it's going to work, and it's going to work on all the different things. And so that's why I was playing on all of these surfaces.
So if you were going to stamp on this and then maybe do some coloring in, would you use your archival?
Yeah, if I was gonna stamp on it, well, I could use archival ink, or I could stamp in black paint, depending. If you want something a little bit more opaque, because archival is still a dye, even though it's oil-based, it's still going to be a dye. So you could actually stamp in either one, let it dry, and then color in with your markers. And you could even go in and color with a little bit of the paint first in an area, let it dry, and then go in with the marker.
What's it like if you mix the glitter with the paint? Yeah, glitter with paint.
No, you'd probably have to glitter on the paint, because remember, this is going to be opaque. So when you paint over it, you're just going to have like
color the glitter.
It'll be like colored sand. That's okay. Good question. It'd be great for your trip to Arizona. Okay. Right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Any other questions on this? Yeah. I mean, this to me is like, it was the simplest thing, but this is the thing that impresses me the most about the paint. Is just the ability to blast it with water and you get all of that. You didn't have to do anything else to it. So when you're really looking at a paint to layer, it's the easiest thing. And things like chipboard or grunge board, we were doing even like, this is just cardstock stickers, but we were able to just alter the color. But you still see that it's metallic, but you kind of give it that really great antiquing
On grunge
look.
board where it's gray, are you better off doing a layer of white and then doing it, or does it?
No, not at all. See, it's totally opaque. So you could take even a color, just take a pink, do like Victorian velvet. So I can just put this on and just blend it out.
It doesn't get washed away by the gray underneath.
No, because of the opacity. But, if you were working on grunge and you wanted to wet this, you're still going to get it to wick. And then you could even try to get it a little thinner if you wanted it to be thinner before you dry it. So that is one of those things, just to remember that if you're going to, when you want to work with the paints, if you're going to try to manipulate it or play with it, you need to do all of that while it's wet. But on the bright side, if you did something and you're like, you know what, I totally hate this look or I hate that, it's paint after all. You just paint over it. It's going to cover up everything you've done. So that's a whole nother new thing for me that I was used to. Like when I did inks, there would be a point where I did the inks, I'm like, all right, you're done here. If you do anything else, it's not going to look any better. Whereas paint's like, I don't like that. No, just paint over it.
How about wax? That you put some hot wax over something?
I haven't really tried it with beeswax. I've tried it over beeswax, but I haven't tried putting beeswax over the top. No, it's great over beeswax.
Okay.
Because you can really get in there and it gives you time to go in and rub it in there. Yeah.
Do stuff.
And Wendy uses it over rock candy crackle.
Okay.
So you know how rock candy has that shine?
Yeah.
When you rub the paint over it, not only does the color, because it's fluid, go in the cracks, now it's no longer shiny because it's matte. It's really cool. So you're able to really get, all of those colors in there, and because everyone's like, you need a kind of a dull rock candy, and it's like, well, dull rock candy wouldn't be clear. No, it'd be kind of frosty. So it's it's a lot of new things, and this is only the beginning. We've only had these paints really kind of going in our hands for like the last couple of months, because these had to be perfect. So good job.
All right.
Nice.
I don't know. I don't know where you go next. You're very
You guys
welcome.
are rotating towards their corner. We have
Thanks,
time to
Tim.
do anything.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Tim. That was cool.